But thanks so much for joining. This event is sponsored by Bob, Babylon, and Fiamma, three projects that are actively working on BitVM, but there's so many other teams. Quite a few of them are speaking here today. So let's just get right into it.
What do we got, 25, 30 minutes? 30? Cool, I'm going to start my timer then. Cool. Thanks. Wow, oh my gosh, this filled up really quick. Thanks everyone for coming in to listen. I think always the best way to start these panels, because we all might have like different PFPs or whatever online, is just quick intros and kind of the relationship to BitVM and what you're working on currently. We can start from Robin left to right.
Yeah, hi, I'm Robin. I created BitVM. And I'm working on it, both on the research and on the implementation. I'm leading the BitVM Alliance, which is the alliance to implement BitVM. And yeah, that's mostly it.
Hi everyone, I'm Yovela, co-founder of Fiamma. So as mentioned, we are also part of BitVM Alliance together with Robin. And then we are actually utilizing BitVM to build a lot of core foundational infrastructure that's actually lacking in the Bitcoin space. So we have built we're building trust minimized Bitcoin bridging, and so far we are building the bridge also for Bob and also Babylon. And we're also bridging to different ecosystems as well, so that we can have the most trust minimized Bitcoin that can be utilized in DeFi and all other use cases in different ecosystems. And then we are building a ZK settlement layer on Bitcoin that also implement BitVM too. And and then hopefully we can build the most trustless future on Bitcoin with BitVM.
Cool. So I'm Alexei. I'm the co-founder of Bob. I've had the chance to work with both Robin and Yovela on research, and unfortunately not as much on the implementation side recently, I have to admit. Greg, who's going to be joining the next panel, is really deep into the weeds there. At Bob, we try to build products that allow you to use your Bitcoin in DeFi and other applications in a trust-minimized manner, and obviously BitVM is one of the most important components here. I've spent a lot of years trying to build secure bridges, until Robin came up with a solution that actually works in practice. And had a chance to work on the BitVM 2 paper, and hopefully we can get this to production within the next couple of months. Let's see.
Cool. Yeah, and I can definitely attest to the fact, started blogging on Bitcoin L2s and sidechains before BitVM was announced, and the energy that's come into the space and the research efforts have been like an astronomical difference kind of during that time period. So I can't agree that it's a really exciting time. But before we dive into a laundry list of questions that I have on my phone here, who knows what BitVM is? Okay, who doesn't know what it is? Okay, cool.
You can do a private introduction course afterwards.
No, I think the first thing is, let's do, there are a few people in here. Let's do it, Robin, let's just do a TLDR. What is the concept of BitVM? And then, I guess there's this divergence between BitVM, the concept, and additionally how it's implemented and the mechanism of bridge. So just a TLDR on that. We can go into the deeper questions from there.
Yeah, on the highest level, BitVM is a way to enable bridges on Bitcoin, or trust minimized bridges to bridge Bitcoin to other layers, to have better programmability and better scalability of the BTC asset. And it's essentially a way to build better bridges.
Okay, cool. And Alexei, you mentioned from your time that you spent a lot of time trying to build better bridges and they didn't work. Can you potentially highlight why things like federations, over-collateralized proof-of-stake bridges, why in practice we've never seen anything, I guess, trust minimizer distributed at the scale that people want it to be outside of BitVM?
So with bridging, the problem usually resides in custody, right? There's no matter whether you're bridging to Ethereum or Bob or Babylon or Binance or Kraken or Cash App, right? You end up depositing your assets into a platform, and the only way that you can actually do that is by giving up custody. That's just how these things work. Non-custodial systems don't really exist in the bridging space. Now, the question is obviously, how do you get the assets back? And that's ultimately where the bridges come in, or specifically the question of who has custody, and how do we make sure that when I want to withdraw from whatever platform, I can actually get the assets back. And one of the results during my research was that, well, trustless bridges are impossible, unfortunately, because you always end up trusting someone. But the someone can be optimized in a way that it's either another consensus network, or you distribute trust, or you try to ensure that the two chains that you're connecting are the only things you trust, with some limitations. And ultimately, the best kind of bridge is not a multi-signature bridge where you trust like 3 or 5 signers to not steal your money, but something that allows you to verify what's going on both networks. So in the ideal case, if we're bridging from Bitcoin to another layer, the other layer would verify when deposits are made and like mint the wrapped asset. And then when you're withdrawing, Bitcoin would verify that the other layer has burned the wrapped asset and you should be receiving it. Now the problem is, how do you encode that into Bitcoin? And that's where all of these custody solutions come into place, because up until recently, we had no idea how we could implement something called a like client for another layer on Bitcoin. And it doesn't fit into the script, and that's why people used multisigs or outsourced these trust assumptions to third parties. And with BitVM, we now finally have a way to do that in a trust minimized manner, where you use fraud proofs and you can ensure that if something does go wrong, you can prevent theft by having anyone in this room could make a challenge and prevent theft. And that's kind of the big kind of leap that we're making here from, I guess, honest majority assumptions, where you trust as long as a majority is honest, your funds are safe. But if 3 to 5 signers decide to steal, your money's gone, to existential honesty in BitVM, where one person, and I'm oversimplifying a bit here to be fair, like if you go deeper into the weeds, there's like some kind of more strict definitions, but oversimplified, one person in the network is enough to ensure that your assets don't get stolen. And that's, of course, a very big difference to yesterday and what we hopefully will see in the near future.
Okay, so you mentioned there the ability to like execute like a side system like client in script is what is the problem that we're solving here. So being able to verify the state of another network and be able to like process withdrawals or deposits based on the state of another network. And we're doing that off chain. And if someone's dishonest in their like facilitation of these deposit and withdrawals, we can challenge them with a fraud proof on chain. Is that like a relatively okay way to give it, kind of summarize that?
I mean, I guess for those who are familiar, because we're at ETH Denver, right? I mean, although it's actually arguably Bitcoin Denver, but if you're familiar with Optimism and Arbitrum and the designs there, BitVM allows it to replicate something very, very similar on Bitcoin with fraud proofs. So if you're familiar with ETH L2s, basically that's what you will be able to do on Bitcoin. Oversimplified, of course, but.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. So everyone feeling okay about the TLDR? No additional questions? Cool, we're gonna keep moving then. All right, so I guess like the purpose is like, something I am kind of thinking through right now is like, why? Like, right, we have this way to verify, off-chain state transitions and like verify other networks and the state of other networks to build bridges. Like, what is, like when you're thinking of this from like an application perspective, like what are the use cases that we should have these trust minimized bridges for? Because, for example, the CBBTC supply on Base is going up like exponentially right now, and people seem to be fine with using that, which is like just trusting Coinbase, who has a history of rugging people and putting people in jail. So I guess like what is the use case for these trust minimized bridges? Like what was the inspiration to build something like BitVM, and what's the inspiration for you guys to work on it? Robin, we can start with you on like the origin story.
Yeah, I'm in it for the money.
Amen.
Like the thing I care about is better money. I think the fiat money system is quite a scam, and I would like the world to use a better money, in particular Bitcoin, and to make that dream true. We have to solve a couple of technical issues. Most importantly, the scalability problem. Currently, Bitcoin scales, I don't know, to like 7 transactions per second or something. We do have the Lightning Network, but it turned out that it doesn't scale as awesome as we would like it to scale. You still have this issue with like channel openings and channel closings, and every user needs at least one UTXO, and even that doesn't scale quite well on chain. So we need some other way to scale Bitcoin as a payments system, and bridges are the crucial tool that is needed to bridge Bitcoin to second layers where Bitcoin could scale way better than on the main layer. And the second thing is privacy, in my eyes. I think privacy is super crucial. The privacy on the main chain is very poor. These chain analysis companies, they get better and better every year. I think having a private payment system that everybody can use and that is censorship resistant and completely permissionless, that would be the dream, and I think that would be great for our species to have. And that's what excites me about researching Bitcoin or trying to solve these problems of scalability and privacy.
Amen to that. That's probably that's probably the best use case for blockchains anyway. So amen to that. Yovela, from your perspective, what caused you guys at Fiamma to start building on BitVM and start building in this direction?
Yeah, so definitely. So for the most trust minimized type of Bitcoin, it's definitely very useful. So far, we only see that around 1% of it is utilized, right? Though we have WBTC and other solutions. So a lot, the big concern, what's really stopping, more utilization of Bitcoin is the lack of a more trustless technology. So that's why that we're hoping that with the BitVM technology, we can actually increase utilization rate of Bitcoin and exponentially. And then that's actually very useful, right? As Robin said, Bitcoin is a better type of money, so it's a better store of value. So when people are holding more and more Bitcoin, you will actually want to unlock the liquidity out of it, right? Just kind of like you are having a house, and then you can also rent it out to earn rental income. So basically, it's similar for Bitcoin as well. You can actually, put it into DeFi and then earn interest, earn yields in it, and also can even engage with some RWA, so that for Bitcoin holders can have extra yield opportunities. That's very attractive for a lot of Bitcoin holders. So that's why we are trying to bring more Bitcoin liquidity to different various ecosystem and also DeFi protocols. So it's a good thing for both the Bitcoin holders and also for the different ecosystem that want liquidity as well.
Obviously, we're excited about, or actually disappointed, to be fair, to start with, that if you want to use Bitcoin for anything else in payments, you have to trust someone, right? And that's been the case since Bitcoin was created. And when I got into Bitcoin, I really got excited about not just the financial aspect, but what else can we do with this, specifically Namecoin, to be fair. And then what was really disappointing over the years to come, you'd see other networks spin up, try to build more decentralized ways of building financial products, having people take out loans, trade, of course speculate and do all this weird casino stuff that's happening as well, but that's just part of what people can do. But if you want to use Bitcoin, you just can't. You always have to trust someone, and people just keep losing money over and over and over again. And that's why we're looking at bridges, and specifically BitVM, because for the first time, in my opinion, we actually have a blueprint that can work without having to change Bitcoin. And previously, what we were doing before is we're trying to use economic game theory to create bridges that are very secure, where you'd use collaterals, and if your assets are stolen, you'd get reimbursed. So think like MakerDAO collateralized model, but with Bitcoin for bridges. Very secure, very easy to build, but very inefficient. And that's where you have to make the trade-off. You can't really use it. It's very safe, but it doesn't scale. And with BitVM, yes, it's a technically complex system, but it actually scales. And the deposits an operator has to put into the system, so it's interesting enough for people to actually make a challenge. They're not related to how much TVL is in the system, actually. And for the first time, you have a bridge that is trust minimized, better than anything else we have on the market, and actually can scale. And that's reason enough for us to dedicate resources and try to actually, get it to production.
Even from the perspective, though, of over-collateralizing the bridge with some token, we've never seen that actually work at scale in practice. So, it's kind of dead on arrival anyways, and that's why everyone switches to Federation. So just kind of reiterating on that point. So the proof-of-stake stuff is just really hard to build. So, I guess from this, though, is we have this concept. We have a way to, kind of in a roundabout way, get similar guarantees to Arbitrum or Optimism, kind of from the Ethereum space, for maybe those people who understand that reference. What's the biggest challenge, though, from taking this from a conceptual idea and then kind of implementing this in practice? What are some of the challenges that you guys have come across within the BitVM Alliance, and then obviously drafting the paper as well? What have been some of the things that have come up that have caused a few headaches during the build process?
Many things.
Such an ambiguous question. So I think, yeah. Is there anything that like is like sticks out though? Is like there's these couple of like very key questions that we still need to solve, or key things that we've accomplished in like the last like 4 to 6 months. Key questions for getting this closer to implementation.
One major pain point for sure is what we call the light client. That is, we want to do chain introspection. That means we want to reason. I have to go a bit deeper into the weeds there. Like we are using that proof system, and in that proof system, we can verify the state of the side system. However, we also have to verify the state of the main chain to some degree, so the state of Bitcoin itself. And to reason about the state of Bitcoin, we need to know at least the hash of the canonical chain. So we need to run some kind of light client essentially in our BitVM setup. And that turned out to be way harder than initially expected. Like we had an idea that was based on super blocks, which is related to non-interactive proof of work. Maybe you've heard of that. That's a great idea to compress the header chain, and we kind of tried to adapt it to our setup, and we came up with a solution. But then, when looking closer at it, we figured out it's horribly broken. It's not very resilient against adversaries. Like if you have, I don't know, I think 10% hash power or something, you can break it. And that is, of course, horrible because it creates all these incentives to mine malicious chains to steal from the bridge. And that's why we needed to come up with more resilient light clients. And we designed a couple designs. We have one design that is simple and also robust to some degree, but only resilient up to 20% adversarial hash power. So that's still far away from these 51% that we would love to have in the ideal case. Then there is another solution that has the trade-off that it reintroduces permissioned verification. So we have a permission set of watchtowers essentially, and we have to trust that at least one of these watchtowers is honest. And that is a super simple design that is very straightforward, and it has great resilience, but of course it comes with that trade-off of having to trust into one watchtower, which is kind of, it's quite bad because the key idea behind BitVM 2 was to make verification permissionless, because then you get that nice property that you essentially have more or less unconditional safety, so nobody can steal from the bridge. Even if all the operators collude, they cannot steal from the bridge. Now we have that case, if all the watchtowers would collude with an operator, they could steal from the bridge. And that, of course, creates ugly incentives and complicated game theoretic aspects. But at least there are some solutions to it, and that's one of the main things that we've been working on recently, and that keeps me awake at night. The other things are more straightforward, actually. There are a lot of hard things. In general, BitVM kind of started this code golf tournament, Bitcoin script code golf tournament. Yeah. We are writing these totally crazy scripts that are like gigabytes in size, and then everybody in the BitVM Alliance is trying to minimize them and to optimize the primitives, like the fields arithmetic, for example. The multiplication has been optimized a couple times, and it's quite impressive to see that, and I really love to be part of this great engineering journey. And most issues on that side are solved, but yeah, the light client remains a challenge for sure. Before I came here, an hour before, we had a better design, but it got broken. so yeah, we're down to the other two designs now.
I think that I have a follow-up on that, but also want to extend the question to you both. Like, what from your guys' perspective, working on, I'd say kind of like projects that are bringing this to mainnet as well. Like, what are some of the challenges that you guys are facing specifically, outside of the things that Robin's just mentioned?
Okay, yeah, so technically, from definitely the Bitcoin Light client is a big issue, but there are actually a lot of issues that we've already overcome, and then like writing ZK verifiers in Bitcoin script, optimizing it, fragmenting it, and then implementing the logic to say, okay, when the operator is malicious, the Bitcoin can become the judge and slash the malicious operator, this kind of thing. So we've done it, and then But so we know that like in the BitVM, we have 3 critical transactions, right? In the assert transaction, actually the transaction size is pretty large, right? It's close to 4 megabytes. Now, after like some optimization, maybe it's like 2.6 or 3 megabytes. Yes, much smaller. Yeah, I guess.
I think 1.6 was the latest.
Oh, okay, maybe it's much smaller now, but it's still larger than like a typical transaction size in Bitcoin, which is around 400 kilobytes. So which means that you cannot, so when you push it out on the Bitcoin chain, it cannot execute automatically. So you need to work with miner to enable Bitcoin to verify, to kind of execute it. So that we believe that definitely brings some centralization risk to the entire system. So that's why we are actually doing the multiple transactions. So we're splitting it up into several so that we can make it like a smaller transaction that can be automatically gone through by the Bitcoin network. So for this part, we actually collaborated this design with the Bob team. Yeah, so this actually will be live on our the testnet with Bob very soon.
Just to add quickly what Yovela just said, maybe it's not clear to everyone. In Bitcoin, there are consensus rules on the one hand, and on the other hand, there are standardness rules. And a chain is valid if the transaction follow the consensus rules. However, in the peer-to-peer network, only standardness or like transactions that follow the standardness rules that are even stricter than the consensus rules get relayed. And one of these standardness rules is, for example, that transactions may be at most, I think 400 kilobytes or something, and we are having these huge transactions that are like 1.6 megabytes, which are valid in consensus, so the chain is valid when these huge transactions are in the chain, but the peer-to-peer network rejects them, so you have to go to a miner directly and ask them to mine the transactions for you.
Anything to add, Alexei?
I mean, we've discussed a lot of the technical challenges. I mean, adding one more to that, since we're shitting on BitVM right now a bit.
Not shitting on
just
BitVM.
kidding.
We just shit on everything else and said this was the solution.
Exactly.
So now we're
I
just
know,
pointing
I
out,
know, I'm just kidding.
engineering. This seems like a pretty technical audience that could come and maybe help find like solutions to some of
That's
these
a good
problems.
point. I mean, one of the other limitations is that we need a trusted setup for each BitVM instance. We need to emulate covenants, which is a problem compared to the others that is much, much smaller because it's more of a problem of, okay, how do we actually do this in practice? So, you have the Ethereum KZG ceremony, we had a lot of people participate. It's been done in practice, it's possible in theory, okay, but how do we actually then do this in BitVM on a continuous basis? So, you can set up, make a deposit, set up a new instance whenever you like. You don't have to spend a lot of time coordinating with a bunch of people. So what you need to do is you need to find N participants, let's say it's 100 or 50 or maybe 10, that will come together and help you set this up. And the assumption is that as long as one of these people destroys their keys, we're fine. So trusted setup, unfortunately needed until we have some form of covenants. And that's another just building block that currently is just being overlooked in the sense because we'll get there eventually, but there's bigger problems to be solved. But that the one thing I would like to add, apart from the technical challenges, is the practical challenges. BitVM is a complex system. There's many, many routes that we can go in terms of optimizing it, changing designs, trying to figure out, okay, how do we make it easy to run for the operator. There's questions about, well, the operator has to make a prepayment, right? That's how it works. The operator always fronts the capital and then claims it back from BitVM. And figuring out the economics and how actually operators, custodians, staking providers, bridge operators will react to this system. That is a hurdle that still has to be taken, essentially. And talking to existing operators and identifying how they would run this, because ultimately the tech might say, oh, this is the most secure model, but then if everybody says, yeah, but this is economically not feasible for me, I can't do this for X, Y, Z reasons, regulations or capital inefficiency, or I'd have to re-implement my entire custody system, that could be a showstopper, even though if the tech is sound. So that's another kind of big thing that we will have to figure out over the next couple of months. Ideally, it comes after the technical challenges.
Okay. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, in general, since we are having this optimistic system, optimistic systems, they have that nice property that in the happy path, they are extremely efficient. Essentially nothing fancy happens on the chain. However, we also have to account for the unhappy path that something bad happens. And then we have to do all this computation to disprove the malicious claim. And the issue here is to balance the incentives, because in general the system has to be designed such that the loser always pays the winner's fee. So there could be two kinds of winners and losers. Either the operator is malicious and the watchtower is honest, then the malicious operator has to pay the watchtower to disprove them. Or it's the other way around, that the operator is honest and the watchtower is malicious. In both cases, you have to balance the incentives such that you just don't troll each other. That if you are lying, then you will lose, so you won't lie. That's essentially the idea behind it, and it's a bit delicate to balance the incentives very well, even in extremely high fee environments that are hard to estimate upfront, right? We have seen chain congestion where we had like extremely high fee spikes, and an adversary could try to start a challenge exactly in that period, and then incentives could break a bit, and yeah, that could create all kinds of issues, and it's hard to predict.
But I do want to point out, right, like to Alexei's comment on like kind of looking at the challenges here. I do want to say we're laying up Isabel's next panel because they're going to talk about how we're going to bring this to market. So that was kind of the idea behind those questions. But additionally, like if you look at the Ethereum space, I think L2s are just, and especially L2s that have some form of like method to essentially verify snarks from that are basically trying to prove the state of the other side system. Like these are just really hard things to build. Like we still don't have an L2 in Ethereum that's not controlled, immediately upgradable by a governance multi-sig, aside from a couple of application-specific ones like Fuel v1. So I do want to put with the caveat that these things are just really, really hard to build, and I think the fact that we have like major funds and major kind of players in the Ethereum space, Solana space, now writing investment theses on why this is like the biggest emerging category, not just in Bitcoin, but the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem, I think attests to the fact that there are a lot of really smart teams that think this is going to be kind of a paradigm shift. So leading into the final question, what's the end game? Like, what do you guys see as the end game for these types of systems? Is this like the long-term way that we're going to be building kind of layer 2 protocols? Like, how do you guys think about that over like the next, like, say, let's say 5 years, kind of more like long-term time horizon or mid-term time horizon? In crypto, that's a while.
Well, the very high-level goal should be that Bitcoin absorbs the entire altcoin market and makes every other coin obsolete. But
Amen to that. Private payments and no more shit coins. Let's do it.
But I would think it would be quite a poor state of affairs if in 5-10 years from now we would still work with BitVM, because it's essentially a hack to hack a ZKP verifier into Bitcoin, even though it was never designed to do that. It's really like a huge pile of hacks piled upon hacks. And it shouldn't be like that. Like we should have some kind of soft forks to enable that in a much more efficient way. And just to give you an idea, the thing that we have been working on with roughly 30 engineers or something, you can build that in Ethereum in like 10 lines of code. And like you could give me a bottle of vodka and I could still implement it in like 10 minutes or something, right? And here we have 30 engineers doing the same thing and just trying to reintroduce what is already possible or happening even in Ethereum. So it would be much nicer to have soft forks that enable it in a native way so that we can get rid of all these hacks and that essentially we have a snark verifier in Bitcoin itself. I think that will be the future, and that will also create this black hole where Bitcoin absorbs essentially the entire altcoin world, because I think then there's hardly any justification for other layers or for other coins to exist, because yeah, you will have every functionality on Bitcoin as well.
Yeah, so I would talk more from like the financial commercial side. So I would think that the Bitcoin definitely would become like the largest like asset that will be used in DeFi and also other financial situations. Like so far, we know that in the crypto world now, Ethereum I think is still the mainstream one, the number one. But with like BitVM, with this technology, then we are able to unlock more Bitcoin, and then they can. So when there are more Bitcoin, then definitely there are more new opportunities, use cases for Bitcoin as well. And then people can just have their Bitcoin as their sort of value, and then maintain stablecoin pretty easily and earning yields with their Bitcoin.
I mean, to kind of continue that, so obviously we want to do more with Bitcoin, right? It's just ridiculous that you can't. We know that it's possible. People want to use it. People go and take a lot of risk to deploy Bitcoin into DeFi or to go to centralized exchanges. Like the users have spoken, they want something like this. But then Bitcoin is very hard to upgrade, right? You need to come to an agreement, and there's a lot of stake involved. And ultimately, you don't really change a working system often, and there's so much at stake, right? If we keep changing it, it might break, and then everything that everybody's built over the last 15 years is gone. I don't think we could recover if Bitcoin fails, right? If there's a massive attack on Bitcoin, that will be a problem. So I think with BitVM, we have a solution that is hacky, but it can get us to a point where we can show that, look, these systems can be built. Layers on top of Bitcoin are the best solution. Whatever VM you're then going to plug into that doesn't matter, but computation that is run on another layer and allows us to do more things with Bitcoin can provide the ideal transparent financial system or alternative to the fiat system that we've all been looking for, and can show that you don't have to build 50 different other chains with complex proof of stake mechanisms. You can use Bitcoin as a trust anchor. And once we've achieved that, once we have achieved a level of adoption, then we can go and say, look, we've proven that there's demand for this. Lightning had 3 forks. Lightning's dead, arguably. It's not doing so well. Maybe it's not dead, right? But it certainly doesn't solve the problems that we're looking to solve here, right? Payments is one thing, but people don't really pay with Bitcoin, and stablecoins on Lightning could work, but it has a lot of its own problems. BitVM is so much more powerful. And I think in 5 years, right, we should have a way to upgrade Bitcoin to make these things easier, whether it's a flavor of BitVM, or ideally we just have ZK verifiers directly executed in script. Something in between, but I definitely think the goal is to enable these layers to exist and to allow users to trustlessly access Bitcoin, financial products, payments, whatever you want to do with your Bitcoin, right? You should be free to do so without having to go to a centralized provider. And then if we look at, just wrapping up kind of on the financial side, we have ETFs. That's great, more adoption, more people are buying Bitcoin. But I personally would consider it a failure if in 5 to 10 years' time, the majority of people who have bought Bitcoin have to go to their bank and ask if they can use it. That's not Bitcoin for me anymore. And just plugging Bitcoin into the old financial system is maybe a means to an end right now. But ultimately, our goal should be to make sure that there's more BTC deposited and locked in Bitcoin layers that are secure by Bitcoin and have trust minimized ways to access and withdraw than in the ETFs.
For one, I totally agree with that. I think one, we said make the altcoins obsolete, but additionally, like long term, let's make the centralized exchanges and the banks obsolete. I think that's a really cool vision. And building on that, yeah, like Lightning's obviously potentially in the payments use case, but giving the people to do whatever they want, not have to like manage channels, do whatever they want with their Bitcoin and let the free market decide, I think ultimately is something that the technology here can provide. So yeah, guys, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, and thank you for working to make Bitcoin better and talking up here today. And audience, thank you guys for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Let's also give a round of applause for the moderator.
You guys make it easy.